What's shaking, booktube? You may be wondering what video I have for you today. Well, it's the Q&A, baby. You may remember quite a long time ago, distant memory. For 7,000 subscribers, I said I wanted to do like a Q&A kind of thing, and I asked for questions basically across Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and also through Curious Cat, which is like a place where you can ask me questions anonymously. With that last one in mind, let me make something very clear. If I get even one mean question, just one mean question, I will fucking destroy you. With that said, I have upwards of 50 questions here, so I'm going to be going through them pretty damn quick. I'm going to be like rapid firing them, you know what I mean? Question 1, and I shit you not, is, why are you so cute though? Thanks. What's your idea of a perfect weekend, costs and commitments aside? My perfect weekend would probably be me with a beautiful girl on my arm, somewhere tropical with water that's just the perfect level of blue dubba-dee dubba-die, drinking out of a coconut. Pretty standard. I'm a bit of a basic bitch when it comes to holiday plans. I just want to be somewhere that I can kick the fuck back. How do you deal with sadness? Do you have certain things that help you feel better when you're feeling down? While any healthy, rational person would probably tell you to confront the source of your sadness, if I'm being completely honest when I talk about things that make me feel better when I'm sad, it's distraction. I like to play video games. If it's even the slightest bit possible, I try to have as much of my friends hang out with me as possible. Usually involves some alcohol to give myself the confidence to open up with them and tell them what's got me so down. That's not me recommending that. That's just me telling you what I do. That's probably not... Most people would probably tell you that's not great advice, so don't consider it advice. Also, if you're ever sad, just remember that this exists. Do you get a constant adrenaline rush from living where everything wants to kill you? Not really. I mean, that effect kind of wears off by like age 3 when your parents do the Australian rite of passage where they have to put you in an arena with 3 of the most deadly Australian animals. What is your Hogwarts house? Ravenclaw, bitch. 'Cause I'm smart. Who shot first? It's like a Star Wars thing, right? I mean, I don't want to alienate any of my audience right now, but I'm not really that big of a Star Wars fan. I've seen the films. I enjoyed them. But that's pretty much as much commentary as I can give on them. But as for who shot first, obviously Han, and anyone who tells you otherwise is a fucking idiot. What advice would you give to a teenage writer? Don't rush it. That's the best advice I can give you, because almost every amateur writer I know or startup writer I know rushes their first project and fucks it up and ruins what could have been a great story, so don't rush it. Is a cat the best writing buddy? No. What is your favorite character that you have ever written and why? My favorite would probably be Arthur from The Architects of the Gifted, and just for the particular reason that at the start of the story he is quite cold and emotionless, and then towards, his arc during the story is that he becomes one of the most protective characters in the series of the other characters. That's one of my favorite character arc tropes, and I knew I wanted to include that in my story. So Arthur himself, aside from, I feel I can confidently say, aside from him being an entertaining and complex character, his arc itself is why he's my favorite. What re the best ways besides reading to learn how to write? Not storycraft, but how to write essentially to sound pleasing. I like you said besides reading, because you knew that's the first thing I would have said, and it is. Reading really is the best way to improve your writing subconsciously. But if we put that one aside, I would say YouTube's your best friend. It's a free resource for pretty much a multitude or limitless supply of writing advice, writing inspiration. Obviously, I'm sure there's a lot of bad advice out there, but there's more than enough good advice as well. I mean, I wish there was one I could recommend you off the top of my head, but no one seems to come to mind. If only I had a playlist to leave in a card up here full of writing advice for you to have a look through. I mean, what's the most quintessentially Australian sentence that you can come up with? Okay. Tell you what, Shagger, me and Bazza, we were down at the servo the other day just after we came from Macca's, and I saw this Sheila there. I went over to her and I said, "What's up, love? How's it going?" And she turned around to me and she said, "Look, mate, I'm only here for a pack of Tim Tams. I got a bloke at home. I'm not here to fuck spiders, and I don't need you all up on my barbecue grill right now, so I need you to back the fuck off, mate. Turn around, fasten your pluggers, and head that way." Now, this was a bit of a shock for me, alright? I'm not used to being spoken to in such a brutal way. But me and Bazza realised pretty quick her name was Sharon, and the last thing you do in Australia is fuck with a Sheila named Sharon, so we packed up our gear, fastened the lid on the Vegemite jar, and fucking boot scooted out there, you know what I mean? How was that? How would you react seeing a fan fiction of you and another fan, male or female? You kidding? I would love that. I mean, I'm heterosexual, but I think if I came across a fan fiction in which I wasn't, it wouldn't bother me at all. I would just be flattered enough that someone wanted to write about me. Actually, that reminds me, there is technically a fan fiction involving me on Wattpad, but it was written in response to a video I made about Wattpad. What is the worst book you have ever read, and how would you retell it if you had the chance? P.S. Love your channel. Thanks, Carl. When I think of the worst book I've ever read, nothing immediately comes to mind, but I don't have a book that is the book I hate most in the world or anything like that. But I suppose I could say The Gunslinger by Stephen King, and if I was to retell it, maybe I would just add something a bit more than a guy walking across the desert for 300 pages. What do you enjoy doing when you're not writing? Well, I'm pretty partial to masturbate. Just playing piano, you know, I'm trying to learn the piano at the moment. It's incredibly difficult, and don't even ask me to play on a video at least yet, because I'm nowhere near competent enough. I've only just started learning. It's like one of my bucket list things. It's one of the things I've always wanted to do ever since I was a little kid, but I just never took the steps towards doing it. My mum couldn't afford to get me lessons or, God forbid, buy a piano or anything like that, but I've got a keyboard now, so I'm trying to learn that way. What's your favorite thing to write, and how did you first get into loving to write? My favorite thing to write would probably be fantasy. At the moment, I'm having a lot of fun writing horror though, or psychological horror. That's something I've always wanted to do. I think what I love most is writing different genres from story to story. I like mixing it up. And as for how I first got into the love of writing, that would be due to reading The Hobbit when I was a kid. I just loved the fact that this guy that I didn't even know created this imaginary world that I was able to fall into. I thought the idea of fiction was just the most fantastic thing ever. I think imagination itself is one of the best gifts the human race has, and fiction writers play with that gift, and I think that's just brilliant. What keeps you writing/not writing? How has people actually reading your work affected your process and your passion? As for what keeps me not writing, I would probably say literally everything ever. But what keeps me writing, it's weird, right? Because, and I think any writer ever will agree with this, is we love writing almost more than anything else, and yet at the point where you sit down to actually do it, you would almost rather do literally anything else. It's really weird. Like, I love writing so damn much, and yet I passionately don't want to do it, but only at the time when I sit down to do it. It's weird. To motivate or inspire myself, I just watch YouTube videos of other writers talking about their writing. That always kind of gets me hype. Or watching movies or listening to music within the genre that I'm trying to write. So if I'm writing horror, I'll watch some horror movies. That usually inspires me. People reading my stuff, I mean, of course it has an impact on my writing, because although when you start writing, you're always thinking of what people are going to think, when you realize people actually are going to buy your book and read it when you finish it, it adds a whole lot more stress and a whole lot more pressure, which you would think would be a driving force, but really just becomes an obstacle. But that's just one of the many challenges you have to overcome when you're trying to pursue a creative career. That's just how it is. How's your writing going? If you could be a spider, what type would you be? What would be your first adventure/activity as a spider? Bonus points if you scurry across the floor, or if you draw a picture of yourself in spider form. The fuck kind of question is this? Jesus. Smoking the reefer, E.H. Knight? Hey? You smoking the wacky tobacco? Hey? Smoking the sticky icky? Huh? Smoking the butt? Jesus, what type of spider would I be? Maybe a daddy longlegs, just because it's funny that people call a spider daddy, I guess. What would my first adventure/activity be? I don't know. Most people would probably say make a web, but the idea of shooting cobwebs out of my ass kind of scares me. So maybe I would just find a dark corner where no one can find me and just nap a lot. Yeet! Would you rather lose the ability to lie or believe everything that you're told? I would probably rather lose the ability to lie, because although everyone has secrets, and I don't think I would want to be spilling my honest thoughts with everyone at all times, especially considering how cynical I can be sometimes, believing everything that you're told would leave you open to complete manipulation. You've implied in the past that you're single, but why don't you just marry a spider? What is with the spider shit, man? Is this because of that video I made like ages ago where I told the story about the spider on my wall? Or is it because I'm an Australian? Because if that's the case, racist, You know what, whatever. If a sexy spider bitch came at me and she had a fat enough booty, maybe I would marry her. What do your friends think of you doing booktube/authortube? What do they think about your writing career? Although the idea of my friends sitting down and watching my YouTube videos gives me a genuine state of uneasiness. Not entirely because I'm not confident with myself, but just because they're all assholes. Surprisingly, they actually are pretty supportive once they get all the jokes out of their system. They do a lot of bragging for me on my behalf. It's actually kind of sweet, but, you know, like I said before, they're dickheads. But to be fair, I'm kind of a dickhead too, so. What's the things you used to think you looked so cool doing/wearing, but now look back on and cringe? Provide photographic evidence if available. Oh god, I know exactly the thing. What is your opinion regarding writer's block? Do you believe in it? I mean, do I believe in it like I believe in Santa Claus? I mean, it exists. I believe in it that writer's block exists, or do I believe in it like parents sending their kid off to college? Because in that case, technically I believe in writer's block. It's doing a good job at what it does, although I don't necessarily agree with what it does. Kind of like a dad who wanted their kid to be a doctor and they end up being a, I don't know, triangle percussionist in a Journey cover band or some shit. How long until the next Architects of the Gifted book is out? Do you outline? Also, what do you do if you find yourself not sure of where to go next? Thank you for all the good advice. Your videos have really helped me. Well, thanks, Stephanie. That's kind of a lengthy question to answer, and luckily I've actually made an entire video on that process of mine, so at what point do you decide that you have edited enough? How can you tell if it is the acceptable level for publishing? My follow-up question, do you believe that writing in today's world can actually be a sustainable source of income? Here's the thing. I don't think any writer is ever going to feel like they've done enough editing, self-editing wise. I'll probably do it like 2 or 3 times before I send it to a professional. Once the professional's done their thing and they send it back, I'll do maybe 1 or 2 more times, and at that point that's when I have to say to myself, alright, this is as good as it's going to be, send it on. And can it be a sustainable source of income? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, writing is more accessible now than it ever has been. I just think it's probably a bit more important in today's world that you try and build a platform before you do that, because big publishers don't dominate the industry as much as they used to. I mean, they still do, absolutely, but despite what a lot of people think and what a lot of people might tell you, the self-publishing industry as a whole is actually extremely profitable at the moment. It's actually doing really well. There might not be a ton of success stories out of the self-publishing world in regards to being huge names, but there are more than enough people that have a sustainable and comfortable income from self-publishing. So it just kind of depends if you're after fame and riches or if you just want to be able to support yourself comfortably, because if that's the case, absolutely, you can do that. What little things excite you the most to find in a name? Things like the book does justice of your favorite food category, or one of the characters has your name, etc. Probably just when you read about an Australian in a book written by like an American or someone overseas, because they'll always jump to at least one Australian stereotype, and I don't think that's a problem at all. Don't get me wrong, I think that's fine. But it's always fun to see what that stereotype is going to be. For example, in most cases, it's the Australian gratuitously using the word g'day, even though no one here says that. Do you think being a writer in Australia comes with its own set of challenges? I mean, yeah and no. There's still plenty of big publishers in Australia and more than enough literary agents. I think being in the US, where most of the big publishers and agents are based, would probably give you a slight advantage. But in the digital age, even that's not so much of a factor. What is the number one tip for new writers who are stuck in the middle of their novel? It's going to sound stupid, but just finish it. Just finish it. Stop worrying about finishing it perfectly. Stop worrying about finishing it exactly the way you plan to do it. Just finish it. Because no matter what, most of the stuff that you write from there until the end is probably going to be changed later, and that may make you feel as if it would be a waste of time to write that stuff, but it's not. You're laying a foundation or a template for what you're going to go back in the second draft and kind of skim over the top of it, lay down some more stuff, some more foundation, and take out bits that didn't work. It's just finish it. That's the hardest part of the whole process. Do you like fuzzy socks? I'm just curious. Okay, look, if that's an inside joke, I don't know what it is, okay? Either that or Josie's on the reefer as well. Sticky icky. What advice would you give someone who wants to start a book/authortube channel? Luckily, I've already done a video on that. It was actually a collab with Aaaaanything. I'll leave a card for that video. There's a video on my channel and a video on her channel going through pretty much A to Z on the advice you would need to start a booktube authortube channel. What and where is your favorite place in the world? My bed. I know that's like a basic bitch answer, but truly. Anytime I'm not in bed, I'm probably thinking about how awesome it would be to be in bed. Have you read your negative reviews on Goodreads? What about the positive ones? What do you think about them? I used to read all of my reviews. I don't actively pursue them as much anymore. I mean, it's not a big issue for me. I think I probably at some point will go back and read them all up to date, but I don't know. No matter how you approach it and no matter how much genuine constructive criticism is in a review, if it's negative, it can still sting a bit, so I try to only do that when I'm in a really good place or good mood, basically in a mood where I feel like I could take that on the back. The thing with Goodreads is that it kind of pisses me off, and I don't mean to throw shade at the reviewing community, but I think a lot of people know this subconsciously, but no one says anything about it. And that's that when people give negative reviews on Goodreads, they also try to be really funny about it and make it like a sassy thing where they throw shade at the author for all these things they didn't like in the story. And more often than not, it's less funny and more just mean and unnecessary. You can write a funny review, even a funny negative review, without it trashing the author for no particular reason. But a lot of the reviewers on Goodreads don't really give a shit about that. That's just my personal opinion. Have you ever written any fan fiction? What is your opinion on it as a genre? No, I haven't, but I mean, it's a pretty established genre. The fan base for fan fiction is one of the largest fictional fan bases as a whole, so I mean, it should be respected and taken seriously. I mean, let's be real, we all know that the hard majority of fan fiction is very poorly written, but when you have someone who is actually genuinely good at writing and has put in a genuine effort at writing about something that they're passionate about, writing fan fiction about some form of pop culture that they really enjoy or a celebrity, etc., whatever, you can end up with some really good shit. You have to remember that the writers for TV shows switch up a lot, and a lot of the time in the later seasons, the scriptwriter is essentially doing fan fiction. I mean, they come in as a fan of the show and they get to write their own story for the show. It's fan fiction, really. That's what it is. What was the first story you ever tried to write? Is there anything you've regretted writing? Tropes, styles, characters, etc.? I have 2 videos that would answer both of these questions. I have a video on the first story I ever wrote, which was fucking atrocious, but again, I was a kid. But that's no excuse. I should have been better. I should have been better. And then I also have a video on facing my writing mistakes. I did that one actually pretty recently. What is your favorite genre of books to read, and what is your favorite book, series, author within that genre? Fantasy and horror, I think I mentioned that before. I'm really into Blake Crouch and Joe Hill at the moment, but the amount of authors that I enjoy is extremely high, but without me knowing their particular names, because a lot of the horror I read is horror short stories, anthologies, which involve, like 10 to 20 authors at a time, so I don't remember them all. But there's just, so many fantastic men and women in the writing world whose work I've genuinely enjoyed, and who, if I needed to, I could find their names if I wanted to read more of their work, that kind of thing. But off the top of my head, no, I don't remember. Has anyone tried to steal your work in any way? Not that I know of, but they wouldn't want to. I will fucking destroy you. Hey Cam, love your YouTube, glad you're growing. When someone is writing, they are always hoping to promote themselves and grow and get larger every day. What did you... And it cuts off. Did I miss a bit or something? I'm assuming you were going to ask what I did to grow larger, and the simple answer to that would just be that I involved myself in the booktube community. When you get involved with a YouTube community, especially one that is, in the grand scheme of YouTube, a smaller community like booktube, it's generally not that hard to find yourself within groups of people, and those groups of people will come to your channel and watch your videos and become an audience. And that could lead to collaborations with them, which exposes you to more audiences and blah, blah, blah. And it's just a snowball effect. If you don't want to do booktube, don't do it. A, because you don't want to do it, and B, because people will notice that you're not passionate about it and you'll be wasting your time. But if you do enjoy reading, which chances are you do if you're looking into being a writer, yeah, working on your brand, work on your platform. If it's not in the form of YouTube videos, it might be in a blog. What advice would you give to a newbie writer? Don't rush it. What can a writer do to be less cliche-ic? I think I spelled that wrong. Well, I'll tell you what you could do to use less cliches. You could watch this amazing video series called Writing Cliches to Avoid. Just search it up on YouTube. Do you think readers tend to judge a book by its first chapter or give it a chance even though the first chapter is much like another popular book? I think 99% of readers will stick with you past the first chapter, but the first chapter is absolutely integral to making a positive impression on the reader. Having a unique first chapter, something that they haven't read before, is how you create what's called a hook. And you want the hook because that's what keeps them. That's what drags them through your story. Hopefully not kicking and screaming, but hopefully much to their pleasure. If you couldn't be a writer, what would your dream job be? I think I would have loved to do some research and study and ultimately work within animal conservation. When I was a kid, I actually wanted to be a firefighter, and I think that's another thing I probably would have pursued. But at this point in time, if I wasn't trying to actively catch a career in writing, I would probably be more so trying to get into animal conservation or wildlife conservation. I'm not going to get all political on you, but I think now as a time is so drastically different environmentally and wildlife focused rather than when I was a kid. Everything's in decline. Earth overshoot day is jumping in leaps and bounds, which is terrifying. And I think now more than ever, we need as much people as possible working towards protecting both the environment and wildlife. And of course, I hope I can still do that in certain ways, but I probably would have pursued it as an entire career focus were I not so passionate about being a writer. Okay, so Raya has quite a lot of questions, so although I've already been kind of rapid firing these questions, I'm going to rapid fire these ones. What was your first YouTube experience like? Incredibly awkward. How did you decide on what content to base your channel on? I started YouTube with the sole intention of creating a platform and marketing, and I just happened to fall in love with the book and writing community on YouTube. What's the story behind the name Wolfshot Publishing? I just wanted to self-brand myself for a lot of the self-published writing that I intended on doing. Could I go back? I probably would have just preferred to use the name Cam Wolf as a YouTube channel rather than Wolfshot Publishing, but that's what so many people know this channel as now. I just don't see the point in changing it. It wouldn't be worth it. Would you ever be part of a multi-co-writing story project, anything with more than one author for any reason? I definitely wouldn't rule it out completely, but I don't think that's what I would be really interested in doing because, I don't know, I have a lot of appreciation and respect for people that can do that, but personally, if I'm working on something creatively, I like to have full creative control. That was one of the biggest deciding factors in me actively going towards self-publishing rather than traditional. Not me saying I could have been traditionally published if I wanted to, that was just one of the main reasons I decided to go that way. What have you seen done correctly and incorrectly when female writers write male characters' POVs? Honestly, I don't have any real comment on that. I think writing male or female POVs comes entirely down to the skill of the author themselves rather than whether they have a penis or a vagina. Do you have tips on female writers writing male characters? I would just try to be honest about it. Write the male characters as they would be, not as they should be. Do you have a lot of real life writing group, family, friends that support your writing? Yeah, I have tons. Pretty much all of my friends and family have been extremely supportive. I mean, they roast me a lot and they make a lot of jokes about it, but at the end of the day, they're always very supportive. What do you do for a living?
All right then, keep your secrets.
Do you believe in writing groups both online or in person? Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Absolutely, they help. Can you recommend some of your favorite authors? I would just watch any of my videos wrapping up all of my favorite and least favorite books from the previous year, like best and worst books of 2018, etc. If you could cast one of your stories, written or not, who would be in it? Directors and producers, if you're into that too. Now, I'm not going to do that because obviously that would be like a 10-minute video in itself. I'm just not going to do that. All I'll say is that if I had it my way, I would probably try to have Hugh Jackman in there somewhere because Hugh Jackman. Yay! What is your goal as a writer? To be able to live comfortably with writing as my sole profession. Why? How did your last relationship end? We wanted different things, or she wanted different things to what I did, and it was mutual. I mean, it was her decision, but there was no animosity there. When did you start writing? When I was a kid. How are you? I'm good. Thanks, Julia. Have you thought of kissing a guy before? Not really. Pretty comfortable with my sexuality. Definitely a hetero. Least favorite genre and why? Probably erotica. Not in a throwing shaded erotica way. It's just not something I enjoy reading myself. And I suppose if I was to throw just a little bit of shade, it would just be that I think a lot of the erotica that gets popular has terrible writing. It just becomes popular on the merit of its sex scenes and kinks rather than the quality of the writing itself. But then I'm positive that there would also be a lot of good or well-written erotica as well. It's just, I don't know, as a genre, it's not for me. Which I mean is ironic that I say that because I've written an erotic story before. As a joke, I wrote it as a joke, but it also involved a guy having sex with anthropomorphic animal people as well. So, I mean, it obviously wasn't to be taken seriously. The first novel you read? Honestly, I'm not sure, but I vaguely remember the first time I was exposed to Harry Potter. It was my mum reading The Goblet of Fire, and I asked her if I could read it after her. And obviously The Goblet of Fire is a chunky book, and it's also the 4th in the Harry Potter series, so my mum was like, I don't know if this would be for you, Cam, because I was a pretty little kid. But I kept asking, and eventually she must have thought, what the hell, and gave me the first Harry Potter book to read, and I just blasted through that shit, like Star Trek Hyperdrive. Favorite classic book? Probably 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I don't know what it is about that story, but the idea of an elderly, scholarly man going on this underwater subaquatic adventure with a guy like Captain Nemo, I know, that story leaves me with a lot of good feelings. What tags do you use on your YouTube videos as a booktuber? Can you not see the tags I use? Pretty much the most basic standard tags you can imagine, like hashtag reading, hashtag writing, hashtag books. Who would you fight? You, bitch! No, I'm just kidding. Maybe my cat, Bonnie. And if you're thinking, hey man, that's fucked up, you can't fight a cat. You don't know my cat. You don't know her. You don't know what she's capable of. I would also fight Mr. Poe from A Series of Unfortunate Events because fuck that guy. When are you gonna read a King novel? Julia. Believe it or not, I actually have read some Stephen King novels. I'm just much more partial to his short stories, and I read the novels a very, very long time ago, so I haven't read them during my time at BookTube or spoken about them in a video. I don't know, maybe I could do a reread, but to be honest, I was never that huge on any of his novels. I have spoken in videos about some of his short stories, in particular my favorite, which was 1408, or Room 1408. I just thought that was one of the better ones. How are you doing? Again, do I look sad or something? I'm okay. I swear. I think I'm okay. Well, now I'm concerned. How am I doing? What do you do? And are you planning to make writing your sole career? That's the plan, Engine Flame. That's the plan. Is it true everything wants to kill you in Australia? Yes. Have you ever left Australia, or has reading about a place made you want to visit there? Sadly, I haven't left Australia ever. I've planned numerous times to go to BEA in the United States. I was actually going to go this year. I got so far as having the money ready to book the flights and accommodation, and then the idea of my first trip outside of Australia being a 30-hour flight or series of flights to the other side of the planet kind of terrified me. So I think I want to fly to somewhere a bit closer to home first. I don't know if it would even count as going overseas, but I would like to go to New Zealand, being that that's the place that the Lord of the Rings was set. Well, I mean, not fictionally, obviously, but I mean the movies. Oh shit, are we done? Are we done? Yeah, baby. If you're still watching, let me first say thank you. Secondly, let me say why. But thirdly, I would just say truly thank you for all the questions. I apologize to future me for the amount of editing this is going to involve, because my god. But yeah, it's always interesting to see what questions you guys have for me, especially being that this time I opened it up to anonymous questions. My Q&A videos are always pretty far apart, so I don't know when the next one will be. But to give you the obligatory sentimental message, it would be that honestly, thank you so much for being a subscriber or an audience member on this channel. It does mean a lot to me. Having the following that I do on YouTube makes me feel pretty damn good about myself. Makes me feel pretty validated, if I may say so. Anyway, for real, I have wasted more than enough of your time today, but that's your fault. You go get yourself a biscuit, and I'll see you in the next video. Catch ya.